I'm 32 years old, and I've never owned anything worth more than $50 in my entire life. That's what I was thinking when I spotted the vinyl record tucked between a dusty accordion and a broken clock radio at Morrison's antique shop. The label read Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, original 1959 pressing. My heart hammered against my ribs as I calculated the potential value. My calloused fingers traced the album cover, checking for scratches. Perfect condition. This could change everything. Pay rent for 3 months, maybe fix my truck's transmission. I glanced around the cramped shop, making sure nobody else had noticed my discovery. Excuse me, but I believe I was examining that first. The voice was smooth, confident, expensive. I turned to find a woman in her late 30s, blonde hair pulled into an immaculate chignon, wearing a tailored navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly income. Her blue eyes held a polite challenge. "I've been holding it for 10 minutes, I said, my grip tightening on the record. I was considering it from across the room. She stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something floral and sophisticated. "I'm Isabel Rogers. Julia Henderson." I didn't offer my hand, and I still got here first. Her perfectly manicured fingers reached for the album. Our hands brushed for just a moment, and something unexpected sparked between us. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. Like finding someone who understood the weight of wanting something just out of reach. "You know jazz?" she asked, studying my face with surprising intensity. My dad played trumpet in dive bars. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I never talked about him. He said Miles could make silence sound like music. Isabel's expression softened. "My grandmother had this album. I used to listen to it while she taught me piano." Blue and Green was her favorite track. We stood there in the dusty shop, both holding opposite edges of the same record, neither willing to let go. The late afternoon sun streamed through grimy windows, casting golden stripes across her face. "Tell you what," she said finally. "Why don't we flip for it?" I laughed despite myself. "You want to gamble for $100 album? Is that what it's worth?" She seemed genuinely surprised. I was thinking more about the memories. That stopped me cold. Rich people didn't usually care about memories when they could just buy new ones. I studied her face, looking for the catch. Her eyes held something I recognized from my own mirror on particularly hard days. Loneliness. "Keep the record," I said, releasing my grip. "But tell me why you really want it." Isabel blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "That's personal." So was admitting my dad played in dives. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently tracing the album cover the same way mine had. "I haven't listened to music in 3 years. Not since my grandmother died. This was the last thing we shared before she got sick." The honesty in her voice hit me like a punch to the chest. Here I was thinking about rent money, while she was trying to reconnect with someone she loved. Shame burned hot in my throat. "You know what? Split the difference. 25 each. That's not how purchases work." But she was smiling now, genuine and warm. "Says who? Harold owes me a favor anyway." I nodded toward the shop owner, who was pretending not to eavesdrop while organizing the same shelf of tchotchkes for the 3rd time. Isabel extended her hand again, this time for a proper shake. "Deal. But only if you let me buy you coffee and tell me more about those dive bar stories." I hesitated. Coffee with someone like her felt dangerous, like stepping into a world where I'd never belong. But something about the way she'd talked about her grandmother, the genuine sadness in her expensive blue eyes, made me nod. "There's a diner down the street. Fair warning though, it's not Starbucks." "Good. I hate corporate coffee." As we walked to the counter to split our unlikely purchase, I caught Harold grinning at us like he'd just witnessed something historic. Maybe he had. I'd never shared a $25 gamble with a stranger before, especially not one who smelled like money and carried herself like she owned the world. But as Isabel carefully tucked the album into her designer purse, treating it like the treasure it was, I realized maybe I'd been wrong about rich people. Or maybe I'd just been wrong about her. 3 days after our coffee at Murphy's Diner turned into a 4-hour conversation about everything from jazz to her grandmother's secret bourbon recipe, Isabel called me. Her voice sounded different over the phone, less polished, more vulnerable. "I know this sounds crazy, but would you teach me about birds?" I nearly dropped my phone. "You want to go bird watching? You mentioned it's your job. I've never done anything like that before." It's not exactly glamorous work, Isabel. Early mornings, muddy trails, lots of standing around with binoculars. Perfect. I need unglamorous. That's how I found myself at Boyd Hill Nature Preserve at dawn, watching Isabel Rogers step out of her silver Mercedes wearing spotless white designer jeans and heels that had no business on a nature trail. She looked like she'd dressed for a garden party, not a swamp walk. "Those shoes are going to be a problem," I said, shouldering my equipment bag. She glanced down at her feet, then at my worn hiking boots. "I don't own anything else." "Size 8? 7.5. I dug through my truck and found an old pair of sneakers. "Close enough. Trust me, the alligators don't care about fashion." "Alligators?" Her blue eyes widened. "Relax. They're more scared of you than you are of them." I handed her the binoculars. "First lesson, everything in nature is trying to survive, just like us." We walked the boardwalk in relative silence, Isabel struggling with the unfamiliar weight of the binoculars around her neck. I pointed out a great blue heron standing motionless in the shallows, its neck coiled like a spring. "How does it stay so still?" she whispered. "Patience. It knows the fish will come if it waits long enough." Isabel studied the bird through the lenses, her breathing quiet and focused. "It's beautiful. I never noticed things like this before. Most people don't. They're too busy looking at their phones. I'm usually too busy looking at spreadsheets." She lowered the binoculars and turned to me. "When did you realize you loved this?" The question caught me off guard. My dad took me here when I was 8. First time I saw a painted bunting, I thought it was magic. All those colors on something so small. Do you still feel that way? I watched a red-winged blackbird land on the railing between us. Every damn day. Something shifted in Isabel's expression, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. "You're lucky. I can't remember the last time something made me feel that way." "What about your work?" "Work pays the bills. This is different." She gestured toward the marsh where an osprey circled overhead. "This feels alive." By the time we finished the trail, Isabel's white jeans were stained with mud, and her perfect hair had escaped its pins. She looked younger somehow, more real. I found myself staring at the way the morning light caught the gold in her blonde hair. "Thank you," she said as we reached my truck. "I didn't know I needed this. Most people don't." I hesitated, keys in my hand. "You want to grab breakfast? There's a place that does great pancakes." "I'd love that." The restaurant Isabel chose made me wish I'd stayed home. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, and a menu without prices. The kind of place where the waiters spoke in hushed, reverential tones, and I felt like an imposter in my grass-stained khakis. "2 mimosas," Isabel told our server without consulting me. "Actually, just coffee for me." I couldn't afford a $15 drink, and I wasn't about to let her pay. Isabel's brow furrowed. "Are you sure? They make them with fresh orange juice." "Coffee's fine." The server retreated, leaving us in awkward silence. I studied the menu, my stomach sinking as I scanned the prices. $28 for eggs Benedict, $18 for pancakes. I did quick math in my head, calculating what I could afford without touching rent money. "The salmon looks good," Isabel said, apparently oblivious to my panic. "I'll stick with toast." "Just toast?" She looked genuinely puzzled. "You must be hungry after our hike." Heat crawled up my neck. "I'm not that hungry." That's when understanding dawned in her blue eyes. The careful way I'd studied the menu, my refusal of the mimosa, choosing the cheapest item available. Her face flushed pink. "Julia, please. Let me buy breakfast. You gave me an amazing morning." I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's gratitude. But it felt like charity. Sitting in that pristine restaurant in my muddy clothes while she offered to pay for food I couldn't afford. The same way it always felt when Christopher tried to slip me grocery money or my landlord's wife brought over extra casseroles. I should go. I started to stand. "Wait." Isabel caught my wrist, her fingers warm against my skin. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking." "About what? That some people actually have to budget for breakfast? About how this might feel for you?" Her voice was quiet, sincere. "I grew up with money. Sometimes I forget not everyone did." The simple acknowledgement diffused some of my anger. "I grew up with food stamps and government cheese. We lived in different worlds, Isabel." "Maybe. But I had fun this morning. More fun than I've had in years." She released my wrist but didn't look away. "I'd like to do it again sometime, if you'll let me." Something in her tone made my chest tight. The way she looked at me, like I was something rare and worth studying. Like the painted bunting that had amazed my 8-year-old heart. "Next time we eat at Murphy's Diner," I said, settling back into my chair. "Deal. But today, please let me buy you those pancakes. Consider it payment for the bird-watching lesson." I nodded reluctantly, and Isabel smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes and made something flutter in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. As we waited for our food, she asked more questions about the birds we'd seen, her enthusiasm genuine and infectious. And when our knees bumped under the small table, neither of us pulled away. Isabel's penthouse apartment occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Vinoy Renaissance Resort Tower. When the elevator doors opened directly into her foyer, I felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole into another dimension. "This is where you live." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "It's too big for one person, I know." Isabel set her keys on a marble table that probably cost more than my annual salary. "I keep meaning to downsize." Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Tampa Bay, the water sparkling like scattered diamonds in the afternoon sun. Her furniture was all clean lines and neutral colors, the kind of sophisticated minimalism I'd only seen in magazines. Everything looked expensive and untouchable. "Would you like something to drink? I have wine or sparkling water or—" "Water's fine." I was afraid to touch anything, let alone sit down on her pristine white couch. Isabel handed me a crystal glass and settled beside me, close enough that I caught her perfume again. She'd changed from her mud-stained clothes into a soft cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my truck payment. "You're quiet," she said. "What are you thinking?" "That we really do live in different worlds." I gestured toward the view. "This is like something out of a movie. It's just an apartment." "No, it's not." I stood and walked to the windows, pressing my palm against the cool glass. "I've never been this high up before. Everything looks so small from here." Isabel joined me at the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "Sometimes I feel small up here too. Disconnected from everything real. Real like birds and mud and $25 albums. Real like you." Something in her voice made me turn. We were standing closer than I'd realized, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes. Close enough that when she reached up to brush a strand of hair from my face, her fingers lingered against my cheek. "Isabel, I know we're different," she whispered, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Before I could respond, she leaned in and kissed me, soft at first, tentative, like she was asking permission, then deeper when I didn't pull away. Her lips tasted like the expensive wine she'd been drinking, and her hand found the back of my neck, pulling me closer. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, reality crashed back in. "I should go," I said, heading for the elevator. But 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Julia? This is Marcus from Sunshine Tours. I have 5 clients wanting private bird-watching excursions. Someone recommended you specifically." 5 clients meant more money than I usually made in 2 weeks. Who recommended me? They preferred to remain anonymous, but they paid for all 5 tours in advance. My stomach dropped. Only one person knew about my struggling business and had the money to throw around like that. I called Isabel immediately. "What the hell did you do?" "I don't know what you mean." But her voice held that careful tone people use when they're lying. "The mysterious bookings, Isabel. The ones that magically appeared after I mentioned money problems." Silence stretched between us before she sighed. "I thought I was helping. By treating me like a charity case? By throwing money at my problems like there's something you can just fix? That's not what I was doing." "Then what were you doing?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to buy me." "Buy you?" Her voice sharpened. "Is that really what you think?" "I think you're used to solving everything with your credit card. But I'm not one of your problems, Isabel. I'm not something you can purchase and fix up like a hobby." The words came out harsher than I intended, but 3 days of overthinking that kiss had left me raw and confused. She made me feel things I wasn't ready for, made me want things I couldn't afford to want. "I never said you were broken," she said quietly. "You didn't have to say it. You just assumed I needed saving. Maybe I'm the one who needs saving." That stopped me cold. "What?" Maybe I booked those tours because I wanted an excuse to see you again. Maybe I'm tired of everyone in my life wanting something from me, and you're the first person who doesn't. Her honesty hit like a punch to the chest, but I was too hurt and proud to back down. Well, congratulations. Now I'm just like everyone else, aren't I? Taking your money and asking for more. Julia, that's not what I meant. Isn't it? You kiss me, then try to fix my life. What's next, Isabel? You gonna offer to pay my rent too? Would that be so terrible? Yes, because then every time you touch me, every time you look at me, I'll wonder if I'm earning it somehow. I'll wonder if I'm just another expensive thing you decided to collect. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I could hear her breathing through the phone, could picture her in that perfect apartment with all her perfect things. I see, she said finally, her voice cold and distant again. The voice she'd used in the antique shop before we'd started talking like real people. Do you? Because I don't think you see anything beyond your own guilt over having money. And I don't think you see anything beyond your pride. My pride is all I have left, Isabel. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in the sudden quiet of my cramped apartment. Outside, traffic hummed along 4th Street, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird was running through its repertoire of stolen songs. I'd just thrown away the best thing that had happened to me in years, because I was too scared and stubborn to let someone care about me. But caring came with strings attached, and I'd learned long ago that those strings usually turned into chains. My phone buzzed with a text. The tour bookings are legitimate clients who found you through online reviews. I never paid for anything. But you're right about one thing. We do live in different worlds. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, reflecting my face back at me like an accusation. Maybe she was right. Maybe my pride was all I had left. And maybe that wasn't nearly enough. 2 weeks of silence stretched between Isabel and me like a wound that wouldn't heal. I threw myself into work, leading tour groups through the preserve and pretending my chest didn't ache every time I spotted a great blue heron. Those birds reminded me of her now, the way she'd watched them with such wonder. I was restocking my equipment in the parking lot when a silver Mercedes pulled up. My heart hammered until I realized it wasn't Isabel behind the wheel. A man in his 40s climbed out, tall and broad-shouldered with kind eyes and graying temples. You must be Julia Henderson, he said, extending his hand. I'm Christopher Powell. The name didn't ring any bells until he smiled, and I caught something familiar in his expression. Isabel's brother? Ex-husband, actually. But we stayed friends after the divorce. She talks about you constantly. Heat crawled up my neck. I doubt that. She's miserable. Hasn't eaten a proper meal in days. Canceled 3 business trips. And yesterday I caught her sitting in her car outside Murphy's Diner for an hour. My throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I've never seen her care about someone the way she cares about you. And because I think you're both too stubborn to fix this yourselves. Christopher leaned against his car, studying me with the same intensity Isabel had shown that first day in the antique shop. She told me what happened, about the tour bookings and the fight. Then you know she tried to buy me. Did she? Or did you assume the worst because you've been hurt before? His question hit too close to home. You don't know anything about me. I know you're scared. I know what it's like to feel like you don't deserve good things. I grew up poor too, Julia. Food stamps, hand-me-down clothes, the whole thing. I stared at him, reassessing. He wore expensive clothes and drove a luxury car, but something in his voice carried the weight of old hunger. Isabel changed my life, he continued. Not with money, though she's helped with that too. She saw something in me I couldn't see in myself, made me believe I was worth more than I thought. That's different. You were married? For 3 years, best friends for 15. I know her heart, Julia. She's not trying to fix you or buy you. She's trying to love you, and she doesn't know how to do it without screwing up. The words hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to argue, to maintain my righteous anger, but Christopher's honesty made that impossible. She hurt me, I said quietly. I'm sure she did. Just like you hurt her. That evening, I found myself walking along the waterfront where Isabel and I had shared our first real conversation. The sun was setting over Tampa Bay, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. I'd been coming here every night since our fight, hoping to sort through the tangle of emotions in my chest. I wasn't surprised when I spotted her silhouette on the pier, but my breath still caught. She stood with her back to me, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer armor. "Christopher said you've been looking for me," I said, approaching slowly. She turned, and I saw the evidence of sleepless nights in the shadows under her eyes. "He had no right to interfere." "Maybe. But he cares about you. He cares about you too. Spent 20 minutes telling me how wrong I was about those tour bookings." Isabel's shoulders sagged. "You weren't wrong. Not entirely. I did want to help, and I didn't think about how it might make you feel. And I was too proud to consider that maybe you were just being kind." We stood there in the golden light, the space between us feeling like an ocean. "I've never been poor," Isabel said finally. "My parents had money, my grandparents had money. I went to private schools and Ivy League colleges where everyone assumed I deserved to be there. I don't know what it's like to worry about rent or choose between groceries and gas money. And I've never been rich, never owned anything that wasn't secondhand or broken, never felt secure enough to trust that good things would last." She stepped closer and I caught her familiar scent. "I wish I understood better. I wish I wasn't so defensive about it. Your father," she said softly, "the one who played trumpet. When did he die?" The question caught me off guard. "When I was 16. Heart attack, probably brought on by too much bourbon and not enough hope." "And your mother?" "Cancer, 3 years later. Couldn't afford treatment until it was too late." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." "Why? You didn't cause it." "Because you learned that caring about people means losing them. And I learned that money could fix almost anything. No wonder we're both scared." She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing mine. "I don't want to fix you, Julia. I want to know you. All of you, including the parts that are guarded and hurt and angry. Even when I'm being impossible, especially then." The smile that spread across her face was soft and genuine, nothing like the polished perfection she usually wore. Before I could think too hard about it, I stepped forward and kissed her. This time there was no hesitation, no careful testing of boundaries. Just the sweet relief of finding each other again after too many nights of missing what we'd started to build. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, Isabel rested her forehead against mine. "I missed you," she whispered. "I missed you too." The admission felt like surrender, but not the kind that left me defeated. This felt like coming home after a long journey, like finding shelter in the middle of a storm. "What now?" she asked. I looked out over the water, watching pelicans dive for fish in the fading light. "Now we try again, slower this time, more honest." "I'd like that." We walked back toward shore hand in hand, the silence between us comfortable now instead of strained. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to misunderstand each other. But tonight, under the first stars appearing over Tampa Bay, it felt like we had all the time in the world to figure it out. 3 weeks after Isabel and I reconciled by the waterfront, I was leading a sunrise tour when my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Christopher. "Turn on the news, Channel 8. Now." I made an excuse to my clients about checking weather conditions and stepped behind a cypress tree to call him. "What's going on?" "Isabel's all over the morning business report. Patrick Powell leaked something to the press about her personal life." My stomach dropped. Patrick Powell was the name Isabel had mentioned a few times, always with a bitter edge to her voice. Her rival for the regional director position, a man who'd been passed over for promotions while she climbed the corporate ladder. "What kind of leak?" "Photos of you two together. Someone took them at that restaurant on Beach Drive last week." I remembered that lunch, how happy Isabel had looked sharing stories about her latest clients, how she'd reached across the table to touch my hand when I'd told her about landing 3 new tour contracts. We hadn't been hiding, but we hadn't been advertising either. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that she's about to walk into the most important board meeting of her career with a target on her back." I ended the call and drove straight to Isabel's office building, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The marble lobby buzzed with whispered conversations that stopped when people noticed me. I didn't belong here in my khakis and field boots, but I didn't care. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I was already in the elevator, pressing the button for the 28th floor. Isabel was in the conference room when I arrived, seated at a long mahogany table surrounded by men in identical navy suits. Through the glass walls, I could see her posture was rigid, her face carefully blank. "Miss, you can't be here," a security guard said, approaching me. That's when Isabel looked up and saw me. Our eyes met through the glass and something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or relief. She stood abruptly, interrupting whatever Patterson was saying mid-sentence. Gentlemen, before we continue with the quarterly reports, I have something personal to address. The room went dead quiet. Patterson's smirk faltered as he realized whatever game he'd been playing was about to change rules. As some of you may have heard, there are rumors circulating about my private life. Rather than let speculation distract from our business objectives, I'll be direct. Isabel's voice carried clearly through the glass, steady and strong despite the tremor I could see in her hands. I'm in a relationship with Julia Henderson. She's a naturalist and business owner here in St. Petersburg. She's also a woman. The silence that followed felt dangerous, like the moment before lightning strikes. Patterson leaned forward, his expression triumphant. Isabel, surely you understand how this reflects on the company's family values and client relationships? Which family values would those be, Patrick? The ones that emphasize integrity and authenticity, because those are the values I've brought to every account I've managed. An older man at the head of the table, someone I recognized as the CEO from newspaper photos, cleared his throat. Rogers, your personal life is your own business. What concerns us is your commitment to the position you're seeking. My commitment has never wavered. In fact, having someone in my life who challenges me to be more honest has made me a better leader. Through the glass, I watched Isabel transform. The polished, careful version of herself fell away, replaced by someone raw and real and completely fearless. I've generated $42 million in new revenue this fiscal year. I've successfully managed our most difficult clients, expanded our Southeast presence, and mentored 6 junior associates. If you want to question my qualifications for regional director based on who I love, that says more about this company than it does about me. The CEO studied her for a long moment, then glanced around the table. Anyone else have concerns about Roger's performance record? Silence. Then let's move on to the promotion announcement. My heart hammered as he opened a folder and pulled out an official-looking document. Effective immediately, Isabel Rogers is promoted to Regional Director for Southeast Operations, with a 20% salary increase and expanded authority over the Tampa, Miami, and Atlanta offices. The blood drained from Patterson's face. Sir, surely the recent revelations warrant further discussion. The only revelation here is that we have an employee brave enough to be authentic while delivering exceptional results. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. The meeting dispersed quickly after that, executives filing out while avoiding eye contact with Patterson, whose political maneuvering had just spectacularly backfired. Isabel emerged from the conference room looking dazed, her carefully styled hair slightly mussed, and her cheeks flushed. You came, she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Christopher called. I thought you might need backup. I thought I was about to lose everything. Instead, you got promoted. She laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. I got promoted. I came out to my entire executive team and got promoted. People were staring as we stood in the hallway, but Isabel seemed oblivious. She stepped closer, her hand finding mine. I was so scared, she whispered. Not of losing the job, but of losing you. Of you thinking I wasn't strong enough to fight for us. You just declared yourself in front of 15 corporate executives. I'd say that's pretty damn strong. Before I could say anything else, she kissed me right there in the hallway, in front of her colleagues and assistants and anyone else who cared to look. It was soft and brief but unmistakably real. When we broke apart, I saw Christopher approaching from the elevator, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Congratulations on the promotion, he said, embracing Isabel. Though I have to say, your timing was spectacular. My timing was terrifying. Sometimes the same thing, I said, squeezing her hand. That evening, Isabel insisted on celebrating at Murphy's Diner, the place where we'd had our first real conversation. She looked slightly ridiculous in her designer suit sitting across from me in the cracked vinyl booth, but she'd never looked more beautiful. So what happens now? I asked, stealing a fry from her plate. Now I move to a corner office with an actual view. Now I supervise 3 regional markets instead of 1. Now I make enough money to buy a dozen vintage albums without checking my account balance. And us? Her expression grew serious. Now everyone knows about us. No more hiding, no more careful public appearances. Are you ready for that? I thought about the whispered conversations in her office lobby, the way people had stared when she'd kissed me in the hallway. Dating Isabel Rogers, newly promoted regional director, would make me visible in ways I'd never been before. As long as you don't expect me to start wearing designer clothes to company parties. Deal. As long as you don't expect me to start getting up at dawn for bird watching every weekend. We'll negotiate. She smiled and reached across the table to take my hand, her thumb tracing circles over my knuckles. I love you, Julia Henderson. The words hit me like a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. I'd felt it building between us for weeks, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way that scared and thrilled me simultaneously. I love you too. The beach cottage belonged to Christopher's construction company, a weathered rental property he'd been meaning to renovate for months. When Isabel suggested we spend our first weekend together there, away from the city and prying eyes, I'd expected something rustic. I hadn't expected magic. It's perfect, Isabel said, standing on the wraparound porch as Gulf waves crashed just beyond the dunes. She'd traded her designer suits for soft jeans and a cotton sweater, her blonde hair loose and catching the salt breeze. It needs work, I said, noting the peeling paint and loose boards. Christopher wasn't kidding about the renovation. I don't care about perfect paint jobs. Look at that view. She was right. The cottage sat on a stretch of pristine coastline, isolated enough that we could see for miles in either direction without spotting another soul. Pelicans skimmed the water, while sandpipers darted between the waves like tiny dancers. Inside, the cottage was simple but clean. Hardwood floors worn smooth by sand and time, whitewashed walls and windows that opened to let the ocean breeze flow through. The kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people, with appliances from the 70s, and a view of the Gulf through checkered curtains. When was the last time you cooked for yourself? I asked, watching Isabel examine the vintage stove with obvious confusion. Define cooking. Does microwaving count? Not even close. I opened the refrigerator to find the groceries Christopher had stocked for us. How do you feel about learning? Intimidated, but willing. I taught her to make simple pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil, standing behind her as she stirred the sauce, my hands covering hers on the wooden spoon. Her hair smelled like expensive shampoo and ocean air, and when she leaned back against my chest, something warm unfurled in my stomach. This is nice, she murmured. I never thought I'd like domestic stuff. You've never tried domestic stuff. I've never had anyone worth trying it with. After dinner, we took our wine out to the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isabel curled against my side, her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Tell me something I don't know about you, she said softly. Like what? Anything. Your first crush, your worst fear, what you wanted to be when you grew up. I considered the questions, surprised by how much I wanted to share with her. I wanted to be a veterinarian, had it all planned out in middle school. I'd save injured birds and help lost animals find their families. What happened? Vet school costs money I didn't have. Dreams are expensive when you're poor. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm. I wanted to be a pianist like my grandmother. Spent hours practicing, dreaming about concert halls and standing ovations. Why didn't you? My parents said music wasn't practical. Business was safer, more lucrative. So I studied what they wanted and became what they expected. Do you regret it? She tilted her head to look at me. Not anymore. If I'd become a pianist, I never would have met you. The honesty in her voice made my chest tight. Isabel, I know we're still figuring this out. I know I'm not good at relationships or expressing feelings. But being here with you, cooking dinner and watching the sunset, this is the happiest I've been in years. Before I could respond, she kissed me. Soft at first, then deeper when I responded, my hands tangling in her hair. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, her blue eyes were dark with something that made heat pool low in my belly. Julia, she whispered, her voice husky. I stood and took her hand, leading her inside to the cottage's single bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting silver patterns across the vintage quilt and worn wooden floors. We undressed each other slowly, reverently, every touch electric against skin that had been starved for gentleness. When Isabel's lips found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, I gasped, my hands clutching her waist. She was beautiful in the moonlight, all pale skin and gentle curves, her hair falling like silk over her shoulders. Our lovemaking was tender and urgent at once, years of loneliness dissolving in whispered endearments and careful caresses. When she arched beneath me, crying out softly as pleasure overtook her, I felt something shift inside my chest, something that went beyond desire, beyond the physical need we'd been dancing around for weeks. Afterward, we lay entwined in the rumpled sheets, Isabel's head on my chest, my fingers combing through her hair. The sound of waves provided a steady rhythm outside our windows. That was... She started, then trailed off. Yeah. I've never felt anything like that before. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in her scent. Me neither. We dozed fitfully, waking before dawn, still wrapped around each other. Isabel stirred first, her lips brushing my collarbone. "Good morning," she murmured. "Morning." We made love again as the sun rose over the gulf, slower this time, mapping each other's bodies with patient hands and hungry mouths. When it was over, we lay watching the early light filter through the curtains, neither wanting to break the spell of intimacy that surrounded us. "We should probably get up," Isabel said eventually. "Christopher will be here to check on the place later." Probably. But neither of us moved. She propped herself up on her elbow, studying my face in the morning light. "Do you think this is crazy? How fast everything is moving between us." "Probably." I traced the line of her jaw with my fingertip. "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me. But not in a bad way." "Good terrified?" "The kind of terrified that means something important is happening." I pulled her down for another kiss, tasting forever on her lips. Outside, gulls cried overhead and waves crashed against the shore. But inside our little cottage, time seemed to stand still. Later, as we finally dressed and prepared to return to the real world, Isabel caught my hand. "Julia? Yeah? Whatever happens next, whatever complications we face, I want you to know that this weekend meant everything to me." "To me too." We packed our few belongings and cleaned the cottage, but neither of us was ready to leave. This place had become sacred somehow, the site of our first real intimacy, our first honest vulnerability. As we loaded my truck, Isabel looked back at the weathered building one more time. "We'll come back," I promised. "You think so?" "I know so." The smell of charcoal and Christopher's famous barbecue sauce filled his backyard, as I helped him arrange folding chairs around the patio table. He'd insisted on hosting what he called a proper introduction party for Isabel, despite my protests that it wasn't necessary. "She needs to meet your people," he said, flipping burgers on the grill. "And your people need to see that she's not some uptight corporate princess." "She's not uptight. I know that. You know that. But Marcus and Elena haven't spent the last month watching you two moon over each other." Marcus arrived first, my best friend since high school and fellow nature guide. He took one look at Isabel stepping out of her Mercedes and whistled low. "Damn, Jules. You didn't mention she was movie star gorgeous." "Shut up," I muttered, but I couldn't argue. Isabel looked stunning in simple white jeans and a blue blouse that matched her eyes, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail that somehow managed to look effortlessly elegant. Elena showed up minutes later with her husband David and their twin 8-year-olds, who immediately commandeered the backyard sprinkler and turned the gathering into controlled chaos. "So you're the mysterious girlfriend," Elena said, embracing Isabel warmly. "Julia's been keeping you all to herself." "Not intentionally," Isabel replied, her smile genuine but nervous. "I've been looking forward to meeting everyone." Christopher handed out beer bottles and got the conversation flowing, but I could see Isabel's tension in the careful way she held herself, like she was afraid of saying something wrong. "What kind of work do you do?" David asked, corralling one of his sons away from the flower beds. "Corporate consulting. Nothing as exciting as Julia's job." "You kidding?" "Jules spends her days watching birds and getting paid for it. That's not work, that's vacation." "It's more complicated than that," Isabel said, jumping to my defense. "She's running her own business, managing clients, handling all the logistics. Plus she knows more about Florida wildlife than anyone I've ever met." Something warm bloomed in my chest at hearing her champion my work. Marcus caught my expression and grinned. "Look at that. She's got it bad. We both do, Isabel said, reaching for my hand without seeming to think about it. The evening progressed smoothly after that initial awkwardness. Isabel asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's photography business and Elena's work as a nurse. She complimented Christopher's renovations and even helped wrangle the twins when they got too rowdy near the pool. But the real test came when David's construction crew showed up unexpectedly, having finished their job early and hoping to join the barbecue. "Hope you don't mind extra mouths to feed," David said, as 5 burly men in work clothes filed into the backyard. I watched Isabel stiffen slightly, then straighten her shoulders and walk over to introduce herself. Within minutes, she was deep in conversation with Tony about eco-friendly building materials and asking Jake about his daughter's college applications. "She's good with people," Elena observed, settling beside me on the porch steps. "Better than I expected." "You expected her to be snobbish?" "I expected her to be, I don't know, different." "Different how?" I watched Isabel laugh at something Tommy said, her whole face lighting up in a way that made my heart skip. Less real, I guess. More like the idea of a rich person instead of an actual person. "And now?" "Now I think I might be falling harder than I planned to." Elena nudged my shoulder. "Good. You deserve somebody who looks at you the way she does." As the sun set and the party wound down, Christopher pulled me aside while Isabel said goodbye to the last departing guests. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a business card into my hand. "What's this?" "Contract for the new waterfront development downtown. They need an environmental consultant for the bird sanctuary component." I stared at the card, recognizing the company name from newspaper headlines. This was huge, the kind of contract that could establish my business permanently. "Christopher, I can't afford to hire your company for a project this size." "You're not hiring us, we're subcontracting you." Isabel set up the meeting. My stomach dropped. "She what?" "She heard me mention the project last week and suggested they might need your expertise. Made some calls, vouched for your qualifications." The familiar anger started rising in my throat, but Christopher held up his hand. "Before you go off half-cocked, let me finish. She didn't buy you this contract. She opened a door, but you'll have to walk through it yourself. They want to interview 3 different consultants, and you'll have to bid against established firms. But she recommended me. She mentioned your name. The rest is up to you." He studied my face. "Unless you'd rather she pretend your business doesn't exist when opportunities come up." That stopped me cold. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" "Because, from where I stand, it looks like someone who cares about you trying to help you succeed." I looked across the yard to where Isabel was helping stack chairs, her sleeves rolled up and a smudge of barbecue sauce on her chin. She caught me watching and smiled, that soft, private smile she saved just for me. "I'm scared, Chris. Of needing her too much, of losing myself in what she can provide." "Then don't lose yourself, but maybe stop assuming the worst about her motives." Later, as Isabel and I drove back to my apartment, I pulled the business card from my pocket. "Christopher gave me this tonight." She glanced at it while stopped at a red light, her expression carefully neutral. "That's wonderful. They'd be lucky to have you. He said you recommended me." She was quiet for a moment, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. "I mentioned your name when the topic came up naturally, nothing more." "And if I get the contract?" "Then you'll have earned it based on your qualifications and their needs." "I can't make them hire you, Julia. I can only make sure they know you exist." The honesty in her voice dissolved the last of my suspicion. This wasn't charity or manipulation. This was what partners did for each other, opening doors and creating opportunities. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For believing in me. For not trying to fix my problems but still wanting to help me succeed." She pulled into my parking space and turned to face me, her blue eyes serious in the dim light. "I love you, Julia Henderson. All of you, including your stubborn independence and your ridiculous pride. I'm not trying to change you or buy you. I'm just trying to love you the best way I know how." I leaned across the console and kissed her, tasting the sweetness of her words and the promise of everything we were building together. "I love you too. And your friends loved you tonight." "You think so?" "I know so. Elena asked if you come with instructions because she wants David to be that supportive of her work." Isabel laughed, the sound bright and surprised. Really? Really? Welcome to the family, Isabel Rogers. The contract meeting went better than I dared hope. 3 hours of presentations, site surveys, and detailed environmental assessments culminated in a handshake deal worth more than I'd made in the previous 2 years combined. I was still buzzing with adrenaline when I called Isabel from the parking lot. They said yes. The waterfront sanctuary project is mine. Julia, that's incredible. How do you feel? Like I might throw up from excitement. I laughed, leaning against my truck. Want to celebrate? I'm buying dinner tonight, and I mean somewhere with cloth napkins. I'd love that. But first, I need to tell you something. Patrick's been making noise again. My stomach clenched. Patrick Powell hadn't given up after Isabel's promotion, despite his public humiliation. If anything, her success had made him more determined to find ways to undermine her. What kind of noise? He's been talking to clients, suggesting that my personal life makes me unreliable, questioning my judgment, implying that I'm distracted by our relationship. That's bullshit. I know that. You know that. But some clients are old-fashioned, and Patrick knows exactly which buttons to push. I drove straight to Isabel's office, taking the elevator to the 28th floor with my jaw clenched. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see her in what was obviously a tense meeting with 3 men in expensive suits. Her assistant tried to intercept me, but I'd learned to navigate corporate spaces over the past few months. I knocked on the conference room door and entered without waiting for permission. Gentlemen, I said, extending my hand to the nearest client. Julia Henderson, Henderson Environmental Consulting. I wanted to thank you personally for your confidence in Isabel's sustainability recommendations for your Miami project. The men exchanged glances, clearly caught off guard by my directness. Miss Henderson, we were just discussing some concerns about potential conflicts of interest, the older one said. Conflicts of interest? You mean the fact that Isabel Rogers has delivered consistently exceptional results while maintaining the highest professional standards? I kept my voice level, professional. Because if that's a conflict, I'd say your company is lucky to have that kind of problem. Isabel's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw something flicker there. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. What Miss Henderson means, Isabel said smoothly, is that my personal happiness has only enhanced my professional focus. I'm more creative, more dedicated, and frankly more pleasant to work with than I was 3 years ago. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about, I continued. 3 years ago, Isabel was running on ambition and caffeine. Now she's running on passion and purpose. Your quarterly reports show the difference. The meeting ended 20 minutes later with renewed contracts and apologies for any misunderstanding. As the clients filed out, Isabel closed the door and leaned against it. That was either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both. I moved closer, noting the tension in her shoulders. Patrick's really getting to you, isn't he? He's getting to potential clients. That's what matters. No. What matters is that you're letting him make you doubt yourself. She was quiet for a moment, then moved to the window overlooking Tampa Bay. Sometimes I wonder if he's right. Not about my work, but about the complications. Dating you has changed everything, Julia. The way people see me, the assumptions they make, the extra scrutiny every decision gets. Are you saying you regret it? No, never. She turned back to me, her blue eyes fierce. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't hard sometimes. I understood that feeling better than she knew. Every time we went out, every public appearance, I felt the weight of people's stares and whispered comments. The nature guy dating the corporate executive. The poor girl who'd caught a rich woman. We could make it easier, I said quietly. Keep things more private. Be more careful about public appearances. Is that what you want? I thought about it honestly. Part of me does. The part that's tired of being examined under a microscope. But the bigger part of me is proud to be with you. Proud that you chose me. Proud of what we're building together. Isabel crossed the room and took my hands in hers. I'm proud too. Proud and scared and completely in love with you. Even when I show up uninvited to your business meetings? Especially then. She smiled. Though next time, maybe we could coordinate our strategy first? That evening, we celebrated my contract signing at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Gulf. Isabel wore a deep green dress that made her eyes look like emeralds, and I'd splurged on new slacks and a silk blouse that made me feel almost elegant. To new beginnings, she said, raising her wine glass. to taking risks. We clinked glasses as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Other diners noticed us, some with curiosity, others with obvious disapproval, but for once I didn't care. Let them look, let them whisper. I was exactly where I wanted to be. Back at Isabel's penthouse, we moved together with the easy intimacy of lovers who'd learned each other's rhythms. She unzipped my dress slowly, her fingers trailing along my spine, while I worked at the buttons of her blouse with hands that trembled slightly from wine and desire. We made love with a desperate intensity born from the day's challenges and victories. When she gasped my name against my throat, her body arching beneath mine, I felt the power of what we'd built together. This wasn't just physical attraction anymore. It was partnership, support, the kind of love that made both of us stronger. Afterward, we lay entwined in her massive bed, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Julia? Move in with me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and risk. Here? In the penthouse? Here. With me. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I wake up every morning wishing you were beside me. I thought about my cramped apartment with its leaky faucet and noisy neighbors, then looked around at the luxury surrounding us. I can't afford to split the mortgage on a place like this. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to share my life, not my expenses. Isabel, I know what you're thinking, but this isn't charity or me trying to rescue you. This is me being selfish and wanting you here every night. I studied her face in the dim light, seeing the vulnerability beneath her confident words. What about your fancy neighbors, your buildings board? Are they ready for the bird guide to move into the penthouse? Let me worry about the neighbors. She traced patterns on my bare shoulder. The question is whether you're ready to live with the corporate executive. I thought about waking up to this view every morning, about sharing coffee and conversation before work, about having a home that felt like ours instead of mine or hers. I'll pay utilities and groceries, I said finally. Deal. And I'm keeping my truck in the parking garage, even if it offends the other residents. Especially if it offends them. I kissed her then, sealing the agreement with lips and tongue and the promise of mornings we'd share. Outside, Tampa Bay stretched toward the horizon, dark water reflecting the lights of our city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for people like Patrick to question our choices. But tonight, wrapped in Isabel's arms in our bed, everything felt possible. 6 months after moving into Isabel's penthouse, I woke to find her standing at the kitchen counter in my old flannel shirt, reading something on her tablet with a frown that meant business trouble. What's wrong? I asked, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind. Patrick's at it again. He's filed a complaint with corporate ethics about our relationship, claiming conflict of interest on the waterfront project. My blood ran cold. Can he do that? He can try. But he's grasping at straws now. My promotion is secure, and the ethics board has already cleared our relationship twice. I pressed a kiss to her neck, breathing in the scent that had become home to me. So we ignore him? We ignore him. She turned in my arms, her blue eyes soft in the morning light. Besides, I have more important things to worry about today. Like what? Like whether you're ready to go vintage shopping with me? An hour later, we were walking through the familiar aisles of Morrison's antique shop, the place where everything had started between us. Harold greeted us like old friends, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Back for more records, ladies? Actually, we're looking for something specific, Isabel said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. She led me to a glass case I'd never noticed before, filled with vintage jewelry. Inside were delicate bracelets from the 1940s, their silver links tarnished but beautiful. They're matching, she said softly. I thought maybe... My throat tightened as understanding dawned. Isabel, I know we can't legally marry in Florida yet, but I wanted us to have something that represents what we mean to each other. I stared at the bracelets, simple and elegant and perfect. Are you proposing to me in an antique shop? I'm proposing that we make a commitment. Here, where we first found each other. Harold was pretending to organize inventory nearby, but I caught his knowing smile as he watched us. Yes, I whispered, then louder, yes. Isabel's face lit up like sunrise as she asked Harold to unlock the case. The bracelets fit perfectly, feeling substantial and real on our wrists. Now what? I asked as we left the shop, both of us admiring our matching jewelry. Now we go home. Our home. The penthouse felt different as we stepped off the elevator. More solidly ours than it had since I'd moved in. My birdwatching equipment sat beside Isabel's expensive art books. My worn hiking boots lived next to her designer heels. We'd created something new together. Something that belonged to both of us. I have something else for you, Isabel said, disappearing into the bedroom. She returned with a manila envelope, her expression suddenly nervous. What is it? Open it. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, and official forms that made my head spin. But one phrase jumped out at me, repeated again and again, joint ownership. Isabel, what did you do? I put your name on everything. The penthouse, my investment accounts, my business holdings. If something happens to me, if we break up, if the world ends, half of it is yours. I stared at the papers, overwhelmed. I can't accept this. You're not accepting charity. You're accepting partnership. This is millions of dollars, Isabel. This is my heart on paper. She sat beside me on the couch, her hands trembling slightly. I don't want to be the rich girlfriend taking care of the poor girlfriend. I want to be your partner in everything. The generosity of it, the trust it represented, made my chest tight with emotion. What if your family objects? Your colleagues? Let them. This is my choice to make. I looked at the documents again, seeing my name paired with hers on every line. Julia Henderson Rogers. We'd never discussed changing names, but seeing it written there felt right in a way that surprised me. I love you, I said, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what she was offering. I love you too. That evening, we stood on our balcony watching the sun set over Tampa Bay. The brackish smell of the Gulf mixed with city air, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the cry of seabirds heading home for the night. Do you ever miss it? Isabel asked, her arm around my waist. The simplicity of your old life? Sometimes. Do you miss being alone? Never. She tightened her grip. Though I do miss the excitement of wondering if you'd call. I'll always call. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of St. Petersburg flicker to life below us. A year ago, I'd been counting dollar bills in a dusty antique shop, hoping to afford rent for another month. Now I was watching sunset from a penthouse balcony, wearing a vintage bracelet that symbolized forever, planning a future I'd never dared dream. Look, Isabel whispered, pointing toward the horizon. A formation of pelicans flew past our building, wings beating in perfect synchronization as they headed toward their evening roosts. They moved with purpose and grace, navigating by instincts older than the city below. They mate for life, I said, watching them disappear into the gathering dusk. Smart birds? The smartest. I turned to face Isabel, this woman who'd changed everything about my world, without changing anything essential about who I was. Her blue eyes reflected the last light of day, and her smile held all the promises we'd made and all the ones we had yet to make. What are you thinking? She asked. That we're like those pelicans. We found each other against impossible odds, and now we're flying together. Even when the wind changes? Especially then. She kissed me as the first stars appeared over the Gulf, and I tasted forever on her lips. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that love could bridge any gap. Patrick might continue his petty campaigns, the world might continue to judge us, but none of that mattered now. We had each other. We had our home, our work, our friends who'd become family. We had matching bracelets and shared dreams and the kind of love that made everything else feel possible. As we headed inside, Isabel caught my hand and squeezed it gently. Our bracelets clinked together, silver on silver, a quiet music that spoke of promises kept, and futures built on foundations stronger than money or social expectations. No regrets? She asked. I thought about everything that had brought us to this moment, the poverty and pride, the fear and loneliness, the careful negotiations of two hearts learning to trust. All of it had led here, to this balcony, this city, this woman who'd taught me that love didn't have to cost anything except the courage to accept it. None at all.